I always thought madness ran quietly in families until I heard that bell ring on a windless night. Welcome to Eerie Short and Scary Stories. Tonight's tale unearths a family secret buried in the Iowa countryside, where something old and malevolent still echoes across the fields. Where are you watching from? We want to know how far our videos get. I hadn't been back to the old farmhouse in years. Maybe a decade, maybe longer. Life got in the way, as it always does. School, jobs, cities, relationships. But when I got the call that my great-grandmother was turning 98, something in me knew I had to go. There are very few people in this world who hold on to time like she does. Few who wear nearly a century on their shoulders and still sit upright, still speak your name without hesitation. So I packed light and drove for hours of flat, endless miles of Iowa, until the pavement surrendered to gravel and the fields began to close in. When I arrived, it looked just as I remembered. The house stood strong, stubborn against the slow rot of age, white paint peeling in thin curls, porch swing creaking without rhythm. The cornfields around it had grown tall again, green walls humming in the late summer heat. It was comforting, almost familiar in a way that felt safe, until I noticed something that stopped me on the spot. The storm bell. That damned iron thing had stood in the side yard my entire childhood, but it hadn't worked for as long as I could remember. Rust had claimed it years ago. Its chain was always wrapped around the pole, like someone had tried to choke it quiet. But now it stood proud. Clean, like someone had come along and scrubbed every inch until it gleamed. It even swayed slightly as if waiting. I asked around. My uncle brushed it off, said he hadn't touched it. My cousins laughed. One of them joked that the bell cleaned itself. I wanted to laugh too, but something kept me quiet. I noticed no one looked directly at it for too long. They joked, yes, but they didn't linger. And the air was too still. You'd expect wind out there, with nothing but open land for miles. But not a single breeze passed. Not once did the corn bend. Even the clothesline remained stiff and stubborn, as if the world had been paused, except for that bell, which waited in perfect readiness. That first night, I sat on the porch alone, long after everyone had gone to bed. The stars above the farm are brighter than anywhere else. The quiet out there is thick, deep. You can hear things you're not supposed to, like the shifting of the earth, or the rustling of thoughts you've been trying to ignore. And every few minutes, my eyes would wander back to the bell. It hadn't moved. It hadn't rung. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd arrived in the middle of something already in motion. Something that had been waiting for me, or for someone. That's when I began to understand. This wasn't just a visit. This wasn't just a birthday. Something was wrong with that place. Something had changed, but no one seemed to care. Or maybe they were pretending. And I hadn't figured out yet which was worse. I couldn't sleep that night. The house was too quiet, in that wrong kind of way, like something was awake and listening just outside the walls. I thought maybe a glass of water would settle me, maybe a book, maybe the hum of a fridge to remind me the world still worked the way it always had. But when I came down the stairs, I wasn't alone. There she was, my great-grandmother, sitting in her old wooden rocker in the living room, straight-backed, hands folded neatly in her lap. The room was dark, except for a dim lamp casting a circle of weak light at her feet. I remember being startled. She hadn't moved like that in years. Not since her legs began to fail her. Not since she needed help just to get from the bedroom to the kitchen. And yet, there she was, fully dressed, wide awake, staring out the window toward the yard, toward the bell. She didn't even look at me when she spoke. Just said softly, as though commenting on the weather, "You heard it too, didn't you?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to laugh. I hadn't heard anything. Not a chime. Not a clang. Nothing. But something about the way she said it stopped me cold. There was no doubt in her voice. No curiosity. Just certainty. Like she knew something had already reached me, even if I couldn't name it. I stood there for a few seconds, unsure what to do, until she turned her head, slowly, and looked at me, and I swear, her eyes, they were sharper than mine. No haze, no confusion, just clarity, deep and waiting. She patted the seat beside her. I sat down. Then she started talking. At first, I thought it was just an old woman's story. Bits of memory, pieces of her childhood stitched together like a quilt, soft around the edges, faded in places. But this wasn't that. Her voice was steady. Her words were too exact. She told me there had been a time, long before I was born, when the bell rang on its own, not for storms, not for fires. It rang when things came through. I didn't understand what she meant. Came through what? From where? But she didn't explain right away. She just kept talking, like someone unrolling a scroll that hadn't been touched in years. She said there were rules. Old ones, not written down. Rules the family had followed for generations. You kept the bell silent. You never cleaned it. You never let it shine. It had to rust. It had to fade. Because the ringing wasn't a warning. It was a signal, an invitation. And once it started, you couldn't unring it. She looked back toward the window and went quiet. For a long time. I wanted to ask more, but something told me not to. Her hands had started to shake. Her lips trembled like the words had taken something from her. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "It called once when I was a girl, and we lost 3 people that night. No one outside the family ever knew. She wouldn't say who. She wouldn't say how. Only this. It doesn't want many. Just one. One who won't be missed too quickly." And in that moment, I understood what had been bothering me since I arrived. Why no one really talked about the bell. Why no one touched it. Why the air was too still. They were waiting. And now, so was I. She told me that, back then, the bell meant rain. That's all. A warning passed down from a simpler time. When clouds rolled in low and the wind turned sour, someone would ring it to let the farms know it was time to pull in laundry, cover the livestock, close the cellar doors. But then it rang on a clear morning. The sky was a gentle blue, no wind, not even a bird out of place. And yet the sound came loud, slow, stretched longer than it should have been, like the metal didn't want to stop humming. At first, no one questioned it. Maybe someone made a mistake. Maybe a prank. But by nightfall, her cousin James was gone. Walked out sometime after dinner, barefoot, left the back door wide open. Never said a word. Never left a note. The family searched the fields. Flashlights. Lanterns. Even a few men with rifles, thinking maybe it was coyotes, or worse. They found one shoe near the edge of corn, half sunk in the dirt. That was it. 2 days later, it rang again. This time, it was her older sister, Elise. She was a quiet one, always drawing in her little notebook, always humming to herself. My great-grandmother remembered hearing her voice singing near the back fence just before sunrise. And then, nothing. Her bed was empty, the sheets pulled back neatly, like she'd slipped out to greet someone. The bell rang more often after that. No one ever saw who rang it. Sometimes it chimed once, sometimes twice. The sound never matched the weather. It rang during snow. It rang in dry heat. It rang at midnight. And people kept disappearing. Her parents were next. First her father, who stood outside in his boots, staring toward the fields for nearly an hour before he started walking. Her mother held on a little longer. She nailed the windows shut, refused to sleep. But on the 7th day, the bell called again. My great-grandmother heard her mother's sobs stop halfway through the night. When she went down in the morning, the front door was swinging wide. There were neighbors, friends, even a preacher who'd come from town, thinking he could bless the place. He rang the bell himself, 3 hard clangs, and dared whatever it was to come get him. He lasted 2 nights. And through all of it, my great-grandmother stayed. She told me she never once looked directly at the bell when it rang. She covered her ears. Yes, but more than that, she stayed still. Didn't speak. Didn't cry out. Just waited. There was something about moving toward the sound that sealed your fate. She watched her brother vanish into corn, watched his shoulders rise and fall until the stalks swallowed him whole. He didn't look scared. None of them ever did. That's what she remembered most. The calm, as if they were being welcomed somewhere. She was only a girl when it happened, and though she resisted, though she remained, it cost her. She lost her voice for a year. Wouldn't speak. Couldn't, maybe. And when she finally did, it wasn't the same voice. It cracked in strange places. She didn't like her reflection after that. Said her eyes looked different. Said she never dreamed again. Not once. I asked her if the bell stopped. She said it did. Eventually. After enough had gone. After the house was empty and the fields quiet. But when I asked why it would ring again now, so many years later, she looked at me, really looked, and said, "Because I'm the last one left." And then she looked at me again, slower this time, and didn't say anything at all. There was one night, only one, when she broke her own rule. She told me it was after weeks of silence. No more rings. No more vanishings. Just stillness. The kind that feels heavy, like the air is watching you. Everyone else was gone. Every voice she once knew had been swallowed by the corn and the wind and that relentless ringing. And in that silence, a question started to take root in her. A foolish one. One that tugged at the edges of her thoughts. Quietly at first, then louder, until she couldn't ignore it anymore. What would happen if she rang it herself? Not for warning. Not for help. Just to see. She waited until the moon was high. So bright, she said it looked brittle, like it might crack, if she stared too long. Then she stood at the foot of the bell, reached out, and pulled the rope. She expected it to clang once and settle. But it didn't. The bell cried out, longer than it should have. Too long. It held in the air, like it didn't want to stop. Like something inside it refused to let go. And then she saw it, from the far end of the field, just where the rows blur into shadow. Something stepped forward. Something tall. Thin in a way bones shouldn't be. It didn't walk like a man. It moved without sound. Without hesitation. Like it knew exactly where to go. She said it didn't have a face. Not one she could see. Anyway, no eyes. No mouth. No sign of anything human. Just a faint shimmer of something smooth where a face might have been. Still, she felt it notice her. Felt the weight of that notice settle over her shoulders. And even stranger, she said it didn't come for her. It stood still, watching, a shape more than a presence, framed by corn that didn't rustle and a sky that didn't move. She didn't know how long they stared at each other. Could have been a minute, could have been an hour. Then it turned slowly and walked back into the field. The bell swung once more on its own. No wind, no hands. And then everything went still again. She never touched the bell after that. Neither did anyone else. In time, vines curled around the post. Rust crept along the rim. Children whispered about it from a distance. But no one ever got close. Even the birds avoided that patch of sky. Years passed. The house aged. So, did she. But that night never left her. Not the sound. Not the silence that followed. And especially not that thing's shape, which she swore she still saw sometimes, at the edge of her vision, just for a second, before it vanished behind something too narrow for anything to hide behind. And now, all these years later, the bell rang again. She looked at me that night with a tiredness I couldn't understand. The kind that doesn't come from age, but from carrying a memory that never let go. She didn't ask who rang it. She already knew it wasn't her. And that was enough. She turned to me with that same look she'd worn the night. She told me everything. Eyes that didn't blink. Breath that barely moved her chest. Then she asked me a question. Did you ring it? I didn't even answer. I didn't need to. The look on my face must have said enough. The kind of denial that isn't just spoken. It shakes you, like your own blood is trying to crawl away from the idea. I hadn't touched that bell. I hadn't gone near it. But that night, I heard it. 3 times. Each ring came slow. Too slow. Each one sank in the house like it had weight. Like it pressed against the windows and slid beneath the floorboards. And once they stopped, the quiet was a relief. It was worse. I didn't wait. I went outside. I don't remember grabbing a coat. I don't remember putting on shoes. I just remember the cold. The kind that doesn't bother with your skin. It goes straight to your bones. The bell wasn't moving. It hung there, perfectly still. No sway. No sound. But I wasn't alone. There, just at the edge of the porch, were boots. My cousin's. He always left them by the door, but this time they weren't lined up like he'd taken them off before coming inside. They faced the steps, like he'd taken them off before going out. I followed the trail. His footprints were easy to spot. The dirt was soft from rain a few days earlier, and his steps went clear down the path toward the edge of the field. Each one spaced evenly, like he wasn't running, like he wasn't scared, just walking. But then they stopped. No turn, no drag, no scuff where he might have lost his balance or been pulled away. The trail simply ended. One last footprint, then nothing, just stalks, and the kind of quiet that doesn't sit. It hovers, like something is waiting. We didn't speak much the next morning. My great-grandmother sat by the window, hands folded, eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. When I told her we were leaving, she only nodded. No words. No questions. Just silence wrapped around her like a coat she'd worn before. I thought maybe she was angry. Maybe she blamed me. But when I leaned in to hug her, she held on longer than I expected. And just before she let go, she whispered, "It's awake again." I didn't ask her what she meant. I didn't have to. We drove away. And the farther we got from that house, the lighter I felt, but not in a good way. Like something had slipped off my shoulders only to climb into the back seat. Back home, I tried to forget. I really did. But the dream started. Always the same sound. 3 bell chimes. Not far off or muffled like a memory. Loud. Clear. Right there behind my eyes. Sometimes I wake up outside. Grass damp on my feet. Wind pressing against me, facing the woods, as if I'd been listening. Once or twice, I've checked my phone, not for messages, for recordings. I don't remember turning the recorder on, but each time there's a file. No voice, no rustling, just 3 chimes, perfectly spaced, calling me back. The ceiling came alive on my final night, not with angels, not with light, but with a circus, grotesque and silent, just for me. Welcome to eerie, short, and scary stories, where the darkness isn't fiction. It's just waiting to be found. Before we begin, where are you watching from tonight? Your bedroom? Your couch? Look up. Just make sure nothing's watching back. I'm Mr. Jenkins, 79 years old. Bedridden, dying. Strange how quiet the world becomes when all you have left is time. Time to think. Time to remember. Time to listen to the humming machines, the distant footsteps, the birds outside the window you can't even see anymore. My legs gave up a while back. The rest of me is just following suit. The nurses try, bless them. They smile when they come in, adjust my pillows, pretend they don't notice when I forget their names. One of them hums while she works. I like her best. My daughter, she calls, tells me about her job, her kids, the usual. She always asks if I need anything. What am I supposed to say? A second chance? The years I wasted? Nobody wants to hear that. The TV stays on most of the day. Not because I'm watching. I couldn't tell you what's on half the time. I keep it on for the noise, for the feeling that someone else is in a room, even if it's just a laugh track or a news anchor reading disasters off a teleprompter. The silence, it gets heavy. Too heavy sometimes. Nights are worse. The walls seem closer when the sun goes down. I find myself counting ceiling tiles, like they might shift or disappear if I look away. I've memorized the shape of every crack in the paint, every flicker of the overhead light. I pretend I'm somewhere else. A porch, a park bench, somewhere with air that doesn't taste like antiseptic and fear. That night, when it started, I thought I'd finally lost a thread. You spend enough time waiting to die, your brain starts peeling back the edges. I figured maybe this was it. The beginning of the end. The mind saying goodbye in whatever way it can. I remember the exact moment. The TV had shut off on its own. That wasn't unusual. The remote sometimes slips between the sheets. Buttons get pressed. Or maybe someone cut the power. Either way, the room fell into this dim, humming quiet. That kind of quiet where you can hear your own heartbeat and wonder how long it'll keep going. I looked up, out of habit, out of boredom, out of desperation, maybe, and that's when I saw them. Shapes, on the ceiling. At first, I blamed my eyes. You get to my age, you stop trusting your senses. They lie to you more than they help. But the shapes didn't blink away. They moved, fluid, slow, like dancers, or maybe puppets. There was a rhythm to it, like a show. Like they were performing. I stared. I didn't call for anyone. Didn't blink. Just watched. Something in me didn't want to stop. Something told me this was for me, and that, my friend, was the last time the night felt empty. It started with a flicker on the ceiling. Just a twitch of motion in the corner of my eye. I figured it was from the TV, maybe one of those late-night game shows, lights bouncing around. But the room was quiet. The TV had gone black a while ago. I never turned it off. It just stopped. At first, I didn't move. I've learned it's easier to wait things out than try to fight them. Pain, confusion, even fear, it all passes, eventually. So I lay there, staring up, figuring my mind was playing its usual tricks. But then it flickered again. Sharper this time. More focused. And then they came. Figures. Thin, long-limbed things, moving across the ceiling like shadows that had broken loose. Not human. Not exactly. Their limbs bent too far. Their heads tilted too low. They didn't walk. They danced. Not like ballerinas. More like marionettes, caught in invisible strings. I didn't blink. I didn't dare. My eyes burned from the dryness. But I kept them open. I needed to see what they would do next. One figure leapt, silent, weightless, and the others followed, in perfect time, like they'd rehearsed. And then the light appeared, a beam, faint at first, then brighter, until it looked like someone had drawn a circle on my ceiling in chalk and lit it from within. That's when I realized what I was seeing. A performance, a show, a circus, playing out above my bed. I should have been frightened. I know that. A sane man would have called for help, would have closed his eyes, prayed, done something. But I didn't. I watched. There were no colors, just shapes and shadows. Yet every motion felt alive. The way they moved, it wasn't random. They were putting on a show. For me, one spun on its heels and bowed. Another balanced upside down, on nothing at all. A third figure juggled what looked like sparks, their glow darting across the ceiling like fireflies trapped in a jar. I could hear nothing. Not a single sound. No music. No applause. Just my own heartbeat. Just my breath. Catching in my throat every time one of them soared across the beam of light and vanished into the dark edges of the ceiling. My body wouldn't move. Maybe it didn't want to. Maybe something deep inside me had decided this was what I'd waited for all along. My private farewell. A curtain call for a man who'd lived too long and seen too little. I told myself it had to be a dream. Some strange combination of old age, morphine, and boredom. But I knew better. Dreams fade. They twist and break apart. This didn't. The more I watched, the clearer it became. Every motion, every shape. Each performer on that ceiling had a purpose. They weren't just entertaining. They were practicing. And I was the only audience. I called the nurse. She came in with her usual smile, the kind that says she's seen everything and isn't surprised anymore. I told her what I saw. I pointed at the ceiling, still tinged with a faint glow. She looked up, nodded slowly like she was indulging a child, and said, "You must have had a vivid dream, Mr. Jenkins." Then she patted my hand, turned off the light, and walked out. I didn't blame her. What could she say? That there was a circus dancing on my ceiling? That my hospice room had become some kind of theater? The moment the door clicked shut behind her, the light came back. Brighter this time. No hesitation. No build-up, as if they'd been waiting. They weren't just shadows anymore. They had detail. Faces, sort of. Lines where eyes should have been. Teeth where mouths didn't belong. They moved with more energy now. More confidence. Like the warm-up was over and the real show had begun. And then he arrived. The ringmaster. He didn't walk in like the others. He appeared. 1 second the ceiling was empty. The next he stood at the center of the light, arms wide, head tilted too far to one side. His suit looked stitched together from old curtain fabric, deep red and worn thin in places. His fingers were long, curved like hooks, and when he pointed at me, there was no mistaking it. I wasn't just watching. I was included. I called the nurse. She came in with her usual smile, the kind that says she's seen everything and isn't surprised anymore. I told her what I saw. I pointed at the ceiling, still tinged with a faint glow. She looked up, nodded slowly like she was indulging a child, and said, "You must have had a vivid dream, Mr. Jenkins." Then she patted my hand, turned off the light, and walked out. I didn't blame her. What could she say? That there was a circus dancing on my ceiling? That my hospice room had become some kind of theater? The moment the door clicked shut behind her, the light came back. Brighter this time. No hesitation. No build-up, as if they'd been waiting. They weren't just shadows anymore. They had detail. Faces, sort of. Lines where eyes should have been. Teeth where mouths didn't belong. They moved with more energy now. More confidence. Like the warm-up was over and the real show had begun. And then he arrived. The ringmaster. He didn't walk in like the others. He appeared. 1 second the ceiling was empty. The next he stood at the center of the light, arms wide, head tilted too far to one side. His suit looked stitched together from old curtain fabric, deep red and worn thin in places. His fingers were long, curved like hooks, and when he pointed at me, there was no mistaking it. I wasn't just watching. I was included. That gesture, simple as it was, cut straight through me. I didn't know whether to scream or smile. I didn't know if I was meant to be terrified or honored. All I knew was something had changed. The performers moved differently now. They played off me, reacted. One juggled what looked like eyes and threw them at the foot of my bed. Another bowed after mimicking the way I'd tried to lift my arm earlier. They were mocking me, maybe, or learning me. And yet, I kept watching. I told myself it was curiosity. A dying man's last bit of wonder. But I knew better. I wasn't just interested. I was entertained. And that's when I felt it. Shame. That deep kind that settles into your chest and makes you question who you are. I was enjoying a show I didn't understand, put on by things that shouldn't exist, inside a room I might never leave. I tried not to look. I closed my eyes, turned my head, whispered the Lord's Prayer under my breath. It didn't matter. I could still see them, even with my eyes shut, like they were burned into my mind. Every leap, every bow, every time the ringmaster turned his head and grinned at me, yes, grinned, like he knew I'd come back for more. And the worst part? He was right. The next night, I asked the nurse if someone could sit with me. Just for a while. I didn't say why. I didn't have the words for it. Not the kind they'd accept. She said she'd see what she could do. A young orderly came in and pulled up a chair. He smiled politely, tapped on his phone a few times, then looked over at me like he wasn't quite sure if I'd already passed. I stayed quiet. I didn't want to scare him off. For about an hour, we sat like that. Him, half awake, me pretending to be. I forced my breathing to slow down, made my eyes flutter like I was dozing. Eventually, he slipped out without saying goodbye. Probably figured I wouldn't notice. Maybe he thought I was better off asleep. I wasn't. The room was too quiet after he left. That awful kind of quiet where you can hear your own heartbeat. I reached for the remote, pressed the power button. The TV flickered, played a half-second of static, then died again, just like before. No amount of clicking or tapping brought it back. And then the ceiling changed. It didn't crack open or shift physically. It felt like it opened, like it peeled back some layer I wasn't supposed to see. It wasn't just shadows and circus shapes anymore. It was people. Faces I hadn't seen in decades. My ex-wife, for starters. She moved across the ceiling like a marionette with strings tangled around her wrists. Lips stretched into a grin she never wore in life. Her eyes were wide, fixed on me like she was performing just for me. Maybe she was. Then came my old drinking buddy, Carl. Died in a car wreck back in '82. There he was, teetering along a tightrope, waving an empty bottle, laughing like he used to when we were young and stupid. But the laugh was wrong. It echoed too much. It sounded hollow, like it had been recorded and replayed through a tunnel. I saw my old teacher, a neighbor I never liked, kids I bullied when I was 11. One by one, they showed up, each playing some exaggerated, grotesque version of themselves. They twisted and danced like they were stuck between puppetry and memory, like someone had watched my whole life, and now thought it would be fun to act it all out. And then there was me, not me lying in bed, gasping at the ceiling. No, this version was smaller, thinner, made of wood, maybe, or something close to it. A puppet, sagging at the joints, pulled along by strings that vanished into the dark. He danced, clumsy, jerky, humiliating steps, his mouth open and closed, mimicking the way I'd talk when I tried to make myself sound more important. His head wobbled just like mine did when I lied and hoped no one noticed. The ringmaster returned, holding my strings. He made a grand show of yanking me into a bow, then tossed his head back in silent laughter. I don't know how I knew it, but I felt it. He was laughing at me. That's when I lost it. I screamed, not just loud, desperate, the kind of scream that shreds your throat on the way out. I begged for someone to come in, to turn on the lights, to stop it. I don't even remember what I said, just that I said it all at once, like the word were trying to outrun whatever was coming next. No one came. The ceiling faded. Slowly this time. The show didn't end so much as dissolve. Faces melted into the plaster. Colors drained. The light dimmed until it was just a regular old ceiling again, plain and lifeless. But the cold stayed. Not from a breeze, not from a draft, just that bone-deep kind of cold that makes you want to hide under the sheets and forget the world. I was soaked in sweat, shivering. But worse than that, I missed them, and that terrified me more than anything I'd seen. I stopped sleeping. Not by choice. My body wanted it. It begged for it. But I couldn't. The moment I shut my eyes, I knew what would come. So I sat up most nights, stiff-backed in that narrow bed, staring at the ceiling as if watching it would keep the thing away. The nurses tried to reason with me. They brought warm milk, sleeping pills, soft voices. One of them even held my hand for a minute, asked me what I was so afraid of. I didn't answer. I didn't think she'd believe me. I think part of her already didn't believe I was still entirely here. They started treating me differently, like I'd crossed a line and wasn't coming back. And maybe I had. The circus didn't just return. It grew bold. It didn't wait for the quiet moments anymore. It came in while the halls were still busy, while I was talking to someone, while I was fully awake. At first, it stayed on the ceiling, still playing out its shows. Then it began spilling down the walls, stretching into the corners of the room. I'd blink, and the light would flicker just enough for a shape to shift. I'd look again, and something would vanish. Some nights, I heard laughter coming from the walls. Not loud, but just loud enough. The kind of laughter you can't place. It didn't sound angry. It didn't sound joyful either. It sounded hungry. And then there was the popcorn. God help me. The smell. Sweet, buttery. Burnt just slightly on the edge. Exactly how it used to be when I was 5. Standing in line with my father at the town fair. I could taste it in the air. That's when I knew I wasn't just seeing things. This was memory. Mine. Dug up, torn apart, twisted into something it was never meant to be. I'd see myself, my younger self, sitting in the audience. Alone. Shoes too big for my feet. Nose running. Hands clutching a balloon that was slowly deflating. I was crying. Not loud, but enough for my shoulders to shake. And no one noticed. Everyone else watched the show. The clowns. The acrobats. The grand finale that never seemed to come. Because right before it did, just as the ringmaster stepped forward to say whatever line he was going to say, always right then, the lights went out. Pitch black. Every time. That's how it went. Night after night. I'd wait, half dreading, half expecting, wondering if this was a time the show would end properly, if I'd get to see how it closed, if I'd finally hear the ringmaster speak. But no, it would all vanish at the same moment. The music, the colors, the smells, all gone, like someone had snapped their fingers and wiped the stage clean. And then I'd be alone again, blinking up at the ceiling, sweating through my hospital gown, gripping the rails of the bed so hard I left fingernail marks. Morning would come. The staff would change shifts. They'd take my vitals, ask me how I slept. I'd lie. I didn't see the point anymore. The moment I told them the truth, they wrote it down like it was another symptom, another reason to keep me here longer. But I wasn't sick, not in the way they thought. Something had noticed me. That was all. And it wasn't done with me yet. This is my final night. I know it without needing to be told. There's a stillness in me that wasn't there before. The kind that settles in your bones when you've made your peace, or at least stopped running from the lack of it. I've stopped asking for help. Stopped calling for nurses. They've stopped checking in too, at least the way they used to. I think they sense it. That I've crossed some invisible line where medicine and comfort can't follow. The ceiling is glowing. Not flickering or teasing the eye like it used to, but glowing, bright, constant, almost beautiful. It lights up everything, every crack in the walls, every shadow under the bed, but I can still hear the laughter. I can still feel them watching. Only now they're not hiding. They're waiting. The ringmaster stood tall tonight, tipped his hat. That wasn't a hallucination. That was for me. A gesture of closure. Maybe, or a welcome. He didn't speak, but he didn't have to. The meaning came across loud and clear. The crowd cheered. That's what surprised me most. I never knew they were watching too. I thought it was just the performers, just a twisted parade of memories and nightmares crafted for my torment or amusement. Hard to tell the difference at this point. But there's a crowd, and they've been watching all along. Laughing, clapping. Some leaning forward as if I'm the act they've been waiting for. I'm not afraid anymore. That might sound brave, but it isn't. It's exhaustion. You can only be terrified for so long before your body just gives up. I think my mind gave out before my heart did. It's strange. You'd think the end would come with panic, with screaming and clawing at the sheets. But I feel quiet. My body's sinking into the mattress, like it's part of the bed now. My breath feels thin, but it's enough. I'm not cold. I'm not in pain. Just tired. They say death is peaceful. I don't know about that. Mine isn't silent. It doesn't tiptoe. It doesn't whisper. Mine shows up wearing a red coat and top hat, with lights and banners and trumpets. It rolls in with fanfare and spectacle, and tonight it brought applause. Applause. For me. I used to think I mattered so little, that I'd vanish without a sound. Just another name on a chart. Another empty bed. But now they're clapping. Cheering like I've done something worth celebrating. I don't know if that's better or worse, but it's something. And now, as I record this, maybe out of habit, maybe out of hope, I realize something else. Something I wish I could have warned myself about sooner. If you're hearing this, then maybe you've already seen them. Maybe you've already felt them. The shifting in the air. The warmth from the ceiling when it should be cool. Maybe you've caught a scent you couldn't explain. Heard a faint chuckle that didn't belong to anyone you knew. Maybe your ticket's already been punched. Maybe they're on your ceiling now, just waiting for you to look up. Go ahead, take a peek. They always love a fresh face. And the show? Well, the show must go on. They say the internet connects us. But what if it connects us to something we were never meant to find? This is eerie, short, and scary stories, where the darkness isn't fiction. It's just waiting to be found. Tonight's story is about what happens when you dig too deep into the digital void. Where are you watching from? We want to know how far our videos get. I wasn't looking for trouble, just answers. Kyle and I had known each other since high school. We weren't exactly glued at the hip, but we were close in the way that matters. The kind of friendship that doesn't wear out even after years of silence. He was always a guy who understood things no one else did. Codes, servers, weird backdoor stuff in systems I couldn't even name. I was never really into all that. Still, I listened, mostly because he lit up when he talked about it. We lost touch after college. Life pulled us in different directions, and before I knew it, months turned into years. Then, out of nowhere, he messaged me. No greeting. No catching up. Just a single line. You need to see this. Attached was a file. No explanation. Just a weird text document filled with links. Lines of characters that didn't look like any site I'd ever visited. The kind of stuff you don't find unless you're really looking, or you've stumbled into something you're not supposed to see. At first, I thought he was joking. Some kind of tech prank. But there was something about the message that felt off. He didn't sound like the Kyle I remembered. He sounded scared. Not panicked. Just hollow. Like he'd been awake too long. Like he was trying to warn me, but didn't know how. He told me he found something. Something buried deep. Said it sees you when you see it. I didn't know what that meant. Still don't, really. I laughed it off. Told him to lay off the energy drinks. And close the message. But it stuck with me. The phrasing, the tone, the fact that he never followed up. And then things started happening. Little things at first. My phone would restart in the middle of a call. Apps I didn't open would flash on my screen. I'd be watching something, YouTube, Netflix, whatever, and the video would freeze for just a second, right when someone looked directly into the camera. Every time, the same eerie pause. Their eyes locking on me through the screen. Then came the webcam. I remember the first time I noticed it. Middle of the night. My laptop was closed, asleep, and I was half asleep myself, just lying there, staring at the ceiling. And I saw it, that tiny green light, on, blinking, watching. I got up, lifted the lid. Nothing was running. No apps, no calls, no windows open. I checked the settings, even ran a scan. Nothing. No viruses, no bugs. Just a light that shouldn't be on, staring at me in the dark. I messaged Kyle the next day. No response. Tried again. Called. Straight to voicemail. I checked his social profiles. Last post, 2 weeks ago. A picture of his desk, cluttered with wires and monitors. Caption, almost through. No comments. No likes. Just silence. And that's when I started to get the feeling. Not fear, exactly. More like a slow itch in the back of my mind. Like I'd open a door without meaning to. And whatever was on the other side, it was waiting. I still didn't believe anything was seriously wrong. I told myself he just ghosted. Burned out, maybe. Got tired of the internet and unplugged. People do that. But then I got another message. This time, it wasn't from Kyle. It was from an account with no name. Just a blank profile picture and the words. You shouldn't have looked. And after that, things only got stranger. I should have just deleted the file. But curiosity has a way of prying your hands open, even when every part of you knows better. I waited a few days, told myself it was nonsense, a joke. Maybe Kyle was just messing with me. Maybe he needed help. Maybe I owed it to him to look. So I did. I sat at my desk late one night, lights off, the screen glowing too bright in the dark. The file was still sitting there, untouched. I clicked it open. A plain text list, just as before, rows of strange links, filled with symbols, numbers, jumbled letters that didn't belong in any real URL. I clicked the first few. Dead ends. Page errors. A couple tried to load, then froze. I nearly gave up. Then I clicked one more. Somewhere in the middle of the list. This one didn't give an error. It loaded slowly. At first, it looked broken. Just a blank, gray screen. No buttons. No menus. I sat there staring, wondering if I just caught a virus. Then, faintly, words started to fade in like smoke clearing from glass. 3 words. We few are many. That was it. No explanation. No logo. Just that sentence in dull white, pulsing like a weak heartbeat. And beneath it, to video. The resolution was awful, grainy and flickering with static. I almost didn't notice it at first. The image was so dark it barely looked like anything at all. But as my eyes adjusted, I made out the shape of a room. Cramped. No windows. A single bulb swinging from the ceiling. And someone was standing in the corner, facing the wall. No movement. No breathing. No sound. I thought maybe it was paused. I tapped the spacebar. Nothing changed. Then the figure moved. It turned slow and stiff, like its joints didn't work right. And when it faced the camera, my whole body went cold. There was no face, no features, just a blur, a swirling distortion where a face should be, like reality didn't know how to render it. And yet, I swear to you, I felt it looking at me. It wasn't a metaphor. It wasn't imagination. I felt it, like standing too close to fire and realizing it knows your name. Then the screen glitched, froze. The video cut to black. I tried to close the tab. The browser wouldn't respond. I clicked everything. Nothing worked. My mouse froze, then vanished entirely. And then the entire screen went dark. No icons, no taskbar, nothing. Just a black mirror. I sat there waiting, watching my own reflection flicker in the dead monitor. Hours passed. I know that sounds strange, but I didn't move. Couldn't move. Something about that silence, it held me. Eventually, the screen blinked to life. No desktop. No windows. Just one thing. Centered and sharp, typed in plain white. Now you see. That was it. No signature. No clue where it came from. And the worst part? I didn't even know what I was seeing. I just knew that whatever it was, it had already seen me first. I tried calling Kyle again. Straight to voicemail. No ringing. No delay. Just that cold robotic voice telling me to leave a message. I didn't. I couldn't. What was I supposed to say? So I went to his place. The front door wasn't locked. That should have been my first clue. Inside, it felt like someone had pressed pause on real life. The fridge was humming, lights still on, drawers open, a mug half full on the table. His laptop sat in the center of the room, fan still whirring like it was gasping for air. The screen was a mess, lines of code spilling over themselves in loops that didn't make sense. Not syntax errors, but gibberish arranged in patterns that felt too intentional, as if something wanted to be read, but didn't know how to speak in our language. And buried in all of it, like a message scratched into static, were logs, personal entries, time-stamped, rushed. The last few made my skin crawl. He wrote about a group. No names. Just them. He said they lived in the code, that they weren't people, that they used us to get through to somewhere else. That the videos weren't just content, they were channels. And we were the ones tuning the dial. He said he started hearing things. Whispers through his speakers, even when the sound was off. Faces in his monitor that disappeared when he blinked. Something about seeing beyond the veil of normal and realizing it was never real to begin with. I closed the laptop, sat there in silence. That's when it really hit me. Kyle wasn't just missing. He'd left, and I should have left too. Instead, I waited. For what? I don't even know. Maybe I thought he'd come back. Maybe I was too scared to move. It wasn't until 3 days later that the package arrived. No markings. No return address. Just a plain black envelope slid under my door. Inside was a flash drive and a single note written in red ink on torn paper. You have to finish what I started. My first instinct was to toss in the trash. Burn it. Pretend none of it ever touched my life. But you can't unsee something like that. You can't scrub your brain clean once the stains have set in. And the worst part was, part of me wanted to know. Not for Kyle. Not anymore. For me. So I plugged it in. I didn't want to plug it in. I stared at that flash drive for hours, turning it over my fingers like it might give me some other option. It didn't. So I sat down. And I did it anyway. The folder opened without prompting. No password. Just popped up on my screen like it had been waiting. Inside were video files. Dozens of them. No labels. Just timestamps and coordinates. I clicked on one. The footage was grainy, taken from what looked like security cameras. Some hidden, some obvious. People sitting at desks. People on couches. People in labs. All staring at screens. At first, everything seemed normal. Then something would shift. A twitch. A glance. Then the unraveling would begin. One man tore his shirt open and started whispering numbers into a pencil sharpener. Another stared at his computer until his eyes bled. There was a woman, maybe in her 20s, who laughed over and over until she collapsed. Every single person at some point repeated the same thing. We few are many. I couldn't stop watching. I told myself it was curiosity, but it felt more like compulsion. Like each file hooked upon my mind and pulled. And then I found it. The one that changed everything. It was labeled with a date I knew. 1 week prior. I opened it. My mother. She was in her office, sitting upright at her desk. Calm. Typing. Then she stopped. Her hands froze on the keyboard. She looked up, straight into the camera, and held it for 5 full minutes. No blinking. No movement. Just her face. Still. Silent. And then she smiled. But it wasn't her smile. It was a kind of smile that made your stomach turn for reasons you can't explain. Like your brain knows something's wrong, but doesn't know how to say it. That smile didn't belong to her. It didn't belong to anyone. I jumped up, drove to her house without thinking. Lights were off. Doors locked. No one home. No note. No trace. I tore the place apart. Called her phone. Called the neighbors. Nothing. It was like she'd been erased. That night, I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every sound in the apartment sounded like footsteps. Every flicker of light felt like an eye blinking. I was too tired to stay awake, and too afraid to close my eyes. At some point, I don't even remember how, I passed out on the floor. When I came to, I wasn't home anymore. It was cold. Concrete floor. Damp air. My wrists ached. They were tied behind me. Same with my ankles. I couldn't move much, just enough to see her. My mother, next to me, still unconscious. She looked the same, or close enough. But the more I stared, the less sure I became. Something about the way her chest rose and fell. The rhythm was off, like she was mimicking sleep instead of actually resting. And across the room, I saw him. Kyle. Or what was left. He was standing, watching me, mouth pulled wide in a grin that never touched his eyes. And those eyes, they weren't his. I don't even know how to explain it. They didn't blink, didn't move, just stared like painted on glass, like someone else was looking through them. He walked over slowly, still grinning. "You opened the door," he said. Calm, matter of fact, like he was pointing out spilled milk. "They're through now." And that was when I realized this wasn't about Kyle, or my mother, or me. It was never just one door. I escaped. I don't know how. 1 minute, I was in that place with Kyle's voice echoing in my ears, and the next, I was outside, cold air, headlights passing. No one chasing me. No alarms. Just freedom, handed to me too easily, which is why I don't think I escaped at all. I think they let me go. That thought follows me now, everywhere. It's in the silence between footsteps, in the pause before my phone lights up, like I'm a marked file, open and left running in the background. Things aren't the same. I can't even look at screens for too long without getting the feeling someone's looking back. Static doesn't act like static anymore. It crawls. Sometimes if I blink, it shifts, shapes flicker, mouths move. Once, I swear I saw my own face in a blank monitor, smiling when I wasn't. Mirrors are worse. I've started covering most of them, but when I forget, I see things. Not clearly, just a flash of something wrong. A head tilted too far. Eyes that don't wait for me to blink. It's always brief, but never brief enough to forget. And the internet, it feels thinner now, like a film stretched too tight. Sometimes websites load in languages I don't recognize. Sometimes I get messages I didn't ask for, just strings of numbers or half-finished words. Last week, a video autoplayed on my phone. It had no title, just that same phrase, whispered over and over. We few are many. The power goes out more often than it used to. Entire blocks gone in seconds. When it comes back, things are missing. Not things I can prove, just things I remember being there. Street signs, stores, a bench I sat on every morning that just isn't anymore. People are disappearing, too. Not in droves, not all at once, but quietly, gradually. A neighbor I used to see walking her dog. A cashier who always wore green nail polish. They're just gone. Their names stopped showing up in directories. Their social media locks. No goodbyes. No explanations. I started hearing about calls that never happened. A friend told me I FaceTimed her at 3 a.m. Said I didn't speak, just stared. Eyes wide. No blinking. I was asleep. Or at least, I think I was. But I checked the logs and sure enough, there it was. A 2-minute video call. Placed for my number. Everywhere I go, the phrase follows. We few are many. It's been scrawled in pencil on a dollar bill I got as change. Printed at the bottom of a restaurant receipt. Once, it popped up as a notification from an app one don't remember downloading. I've tried deleting things, resetting my devices, buying new ones. Doesn't matter. The phrase still finds a way. I even saw it on a billboard once, advertising some furniture store, in tiny text near the corner, almost like a signature. I don't know how far it's gone. How many others know? If anyone else sees what I see. I haven't told anyone. Not really. What would I say? All I know is I opened something. Or maybe I woke it. Or maybe it was always here. Just waiting for someone to look the wrong way. And now, everywhere I look, every screen, every reflection, every flicker in the corner of my eye, it's there. Watching. We few are many. I'm speaking into a recorder I found under a stack of clothes in a thrift store. No connection. No syncing. Just tape and buttons. That's the only reason I think they haven't shut it off yet. The lights are out. They've been out for hours. The sun hasn't come up, and I don't think it will. I've stopped checking the time. Clocks lie now. They loop, they tick forward, then snap backward, like they're arguing with themselves. I caught one stuck at 3:17 a.m. for what felt like an entire afternoon. Everyone's gone. Or replaced. I can't tell anymore. People I knew since childhood suddenly call me by the wrong name. They laugh a beat too late. They walk like they just learned how. I asked my sister if she remembered our old dog. She said we never had one, but I have pictures. Somewhere. I ran weeks ago. Packed nothing. Just walked into the woods. No GPS. No phone. But the trees had cell towers now. Some bent into shapes they shouldn't be able to make. And at night, my old school friends whispered through the leaves. Friends who are buried in the ground. 3 towns over. Going off-grid didn't help. Turns out, the grid is everywhere. It hums in the soil. It pulses under your skin. You can't unplug from something that's moved into your blood. Sometimes I see Kyle. Not really him. A flicker. Just past the edge of where I'm looking. Same hoodie. Same half-smile. But he's blurry now. Like someone reassembled from memory and got parts wrong. He never says anything new. Just the same thing. Over and over. You open the door. I didn't mean to. I didn't know it was a door. And once it opened, it never closed. I think that's the part they needed me for. The invitation. The choice. The moment someone, somewhere, clicked yes without reading the fine print. They're past the web now. That was just a hallway. They're in the feed, riding every scroll, every autoplay, every blinking cursor. They drift through cloud backups and autofill suggestions. They don't knock anymore. They don't have to. They are the connection. I hear footsteps outside. They're not footsteps like ours. More like the memory of movement. Like someone remembering how humans used to walk. They pause outside the door every few minutes, like they're waiting for the end of something. Maybe this recording. I'm whispering now, but I don't know why. There's no one left awake. They say the same phrase each time they arrive. I don't know where it came from. Maybe it came through the code. Maybe from somewhere older. But I hear it everywhere now. In my dreams. In the static. On the backs of receipts that print with no one behind the counter. We few are many. If you're hearing this, it means the tape survived. I don't know if I did. My name's Jess, and I've been hunting since I was old enough to hold a rifle steady without it knocking me off balance. Out here, you don't wait around for someone else to bring home the meat. You do it yourself or you don't eat. I live deep in the northern woods, a few miles from the last real road, where the only things that move after sundown are the wind and whatever's hungry. My husband, Frank, used to come with me. He's a good shot, anyway. Lately, he's been down. Some kind of bug. Maybe worse. He sleeps too much, sweats through the sheets, doesn't say much. That morning, I checked his forehead, loaded my pack, and told him I'd be back before dark. He nodded, didn't look me in the eye. The cold hit as soon as I stepped outside. It wasn't just cold, it was still. Everything felt frozen in place. No bird song, no wind in the trees. Just the crunch of my boots and the tight sound of snow giving under my steps. Normally, when I head into those woods, there's life all around. Rabbits darting off through the brush, maybe the flicker of a tail behind a tree. Squirrels chattering like they own the place. But that day, nothing. No movement. No noise. Like the forest had taken a breath and never let it out. I thought maybe it was the weather. We had a cold snap last week, and sometimes that makes the animals go quiet. Still, it sat wrong with me. There wasn't even a set of tracks in the fresh powder. Not from deer. Not from foxes. Not even birds hopping around the base of the pines. I've never seen the snow so clean. It looked untouched, like no living thing had dared to pass through. Every few steps, I stopped and listened. Not because I heard something. Because I didn't. That kind of quiet makes you aware of your own heartbeat, your own breath. You start to notice how loud your gear is, your pack shifting, the click of a buckle, your coat brushing your rifle. Out there in that silence, it felt like each sound I made didn't just echo. It landed somewhere, like something was taking note. Still, I walked. The buck I was after had left tracks the day before, and I knew the trail. I didn't think much of the silence. Not then. I figured I'd push through the usual path, spot the prints, and drag him home before dark. I've done that more times than I can count. But something about that morning, it sat strange in my chest. Like I was moving through a place I'd known all my life, only it didn't recognize me anymore. I kept going. Rifle ready, step steady, eyes scanning the trees. I should have turned back when I had the chance. But out here, turning back feels like admitting something's bigger than you. And I wasn't ready to admit that yet. Not then. Not when the woods still looked like they belonged to me. I'd already spotted the buck before it noticed me. Broad-chested, heavy in the legs, standing half-covered by a birch tree stripped bare for winter. It didn't even flinch when I raised the rifle. One clean shot, right through the neck. It dropped where it stood. No fight, no thrashing. Just snow settling around it like a blanket. I gave it a few seconds, letting the sound of the shot settle. Still nothing. No scattering of birds. No echo. Just me, the dead buck, and a silence that hung too long. I stepped closer, crouched beside the deer, and gave its side a nudge. Dead, for sure. I reached for the rope in my pack, thinking I'd hook it around the antlers and get to dragging. That's when I saw them. The prints. Not mine. Not deer. They were too wide. Too long. At first, I thought they might be from a man, maybe someone from another cabin, or a trapper passing through. But the shape was wrong. The front half pressed deep like a heel, but not quite, and the toe marks weren't pointed. They were blunted, thick. Whatever left them walked upright, but not like any man I've seen. I stood still, eyes tracing the line of prints. They went past the buck, into the deeper part of the woods. No drag marks. No handprints. Just those strange, heavy steps pressing clean into the snow. I should have ignored them. Tied up the deer, turned around, gone back to Frank. But I didn't. I looked at those prints, then back at the forest beyond, and I felt something pull at me, like the woods were inviting me to understand. Or maybe they were daring me to try. So I followed. One step, then another. I moved slow, careful, matching my stride to the prints to see how far apart they were. Longer than a man could walk without straining. And the depth, whoever or whatever it was heavy. I didn't even think about the time. Didn't think about the deer left cooling behind me. My eyes stayed on the trail, following those shapes as they dipped into a narrow clearing, then veered off where the trees grew thicker and older. The kind of trees with bark that peels in sheets and branches that don't break unless you really mean it. The air started to feel different. Not colder, just blank, like something had sucked all the weight out of the wind. No scent of pine, no sting of frost on my face. Just air. Still. Flat. I kept walking. And every step I took made me more aware of how alone I really was. I kept to the trail, or what was left of it. The prints were still there, just as deep, just as spaced. But I wasn't looking at the ground anymore. I'd started glancing over my shoulder, first once, then again. Then I stopped pretending I wasn't doing it. There was no reason to feel watched, yet I did. And it wasn't a feeling that came and went. It stayed with me, like breath on the back of my neck, steady and unwelcome. I told myself it was just the woods, just distance playing tricks. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was cold. I even stopped to check my compass, just for reassurance. The needle spun, not a slow twitch, just spun like I was standing in the middle of a giant magnet. I tapped it. Nothing. It kept spinning. I shook it harder. Same thing. That's when I slid it into my pocket and stopped pretending it would help. I remembered what Frank used to say when we first moved out here, before the snow settled into our bones and the woodpile felt too far from the porch. He used to say, "You go deep enough, the trees stop knowing your name." I'd laugh at that. Back then, he was the one climbing ridges, laying traps, dragging hauls through waist-high snow. Now, he couldn't get out of bed without leaning against the wall. And here I was, chasing prints I didn't understand, with no compass and no sense. I should have turned back. I even said it out loud, "Turn around," just to hear the words. But I didn't, because something about those steps in the snow, those long, heavy, wrong steps, made it impossible. And then I heard it. Click. It wasn't close. Somewhere up in the trees. Dry, like antlers tapping together. But sharper. Not metal. Not wood. Something in between. I stopped walking. Waited. Another click. Different direction. I scanned the branches above me, then the ones behind. Saw nothing. Just still limbs and open sky smudged in white. That's when I felt it. Not fear exactly. More like recognition. Like I wasn't discovering anything new. I was catching up to something that had already found me. I came into the clearing like stepping through a curtain. One moment, trees on every side. The next, open space and quiet. Too quiet. Not peace. Just a hush that felt forced, like someone had pressed a finger to the lips of the forest. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. No tracks. Nothing. The prints that had led me here just stopped. The deer I'd hunted was long forgotten. My rifle felt heavier than before, as though it knew something I didn't. I stood still for a long time. Snow had begun to fall again, soft at first, but steady. Thick flakes settled on the ground without a sound. I scanned the edges of the clearing, waiting for the next click or some movement, anything to name the unease crawling up my spine. Then I saw them. Tracks. They hadn't led into the clearing. They were already in it. Around me. They circled in the snow like rings on a tree stump. Wide at first, then tighter. Closing. I hadn't heard a single step. Nothing. And yet there they were. Heavy prints sinking inches into the fresh powder, surrounded me like a net I'd wandered into without knowing. I raised the rifle. There was nothing. No shape. No shadow, no figure slipping between the trunks. Just snow and silence, and prints that shouldn't have been there. My eyes searched wildly, not for a target, but for a reason. I turned slowly, breathing through my teeth, tried to listen past the hammering in my ears. But there was only white. That's when I moved. I didn't choose to. My body just decided. I ran, not toward anything, just away. Back through where I thought I'd come from, rifle clutched tight against my chest. My boots slipped in the snow. My breath burned. I didn't care. I had to get out. Had to find the edge of the trees or the ridge or even the old creek bed. Something familiar. But the woods wouldn't let me. The trail I'd left behind was gone. Trees I'd passed only minutes before were wrong. Thicker, too close, or too far apart. I turned, then turned again, and there was no end to them. Just more forest. The ground felt tilted. I couldn't say which direction was uphill anymore. My own footprints disappeared behind me. I started shouting. Frank's name. My own. I even screamed at the sky once, just to hear myself. It didn't echo. The snow came faster now, hard and blinding. I pressed my back against a tree and held still. I tried to hear anything familiar. The whistle of wind, the groan of old wood, a branch snapping beneath weight. Instead, the silence pressing closer, like it was listening to me breathe. I didn't understand it then. I only knew I was somewhere I wasn't meant to be. Somewhere that didn't care what I carried, or where I thought I'd come from. The forest had changed. Or maybe I had. Either way, the way back wasn't there anymore. She saw it. Not clearly, not for more than a breath. But it was there. Just beyond the tree lean. A shape that didn't belong. Too tall, too still, yet somehow moving. The sort of thing your eyes want to skip over, as if looking straight at it might be a mistake. And even from that distance, Jess knew it had seen her first. Had been watching, waiting. She raised a rifle and fired. One shot. It rang out through the trees like it was begging for a reply. Nothing came. No cry. No stumble. No fall. Only snow swirling down through the empty silence where the shape had been. She didn't wait. There was no point. Whatever that thing was, it didn't bleed. When she made it back home, she didn't remember walking. Just the cold. The trees slipping past like ghosts. The way her own steps sounded wrong. Frank was there when she came through the door, but something about him was off. She couldn't name it right away. He looked tired, but not from lack of sleep. It was something deeper. His eyes didn't track her the same way. He didn't blink. Just stood there, stiff and pale, like he was still trying to remember how to be human. She told him what she'd seen. He nodded, just nodded. Didn't ask a single question. Didn't touch her shoulder, or fetch her a blanket, or do any of the small things a man like Frank used to do when she came home from a hunt shaking. He stared too long, smiled too little. And the house, it had changed too, not in shape, but in feel. It had gone still, like the clearing. Then the tracks came. Not hers, not his, larger, deep set. They appeared outside the house every morning, circling. Sometimes leading up to the windows, sometimes pressing against the door. No noise in the night, no warning, just prints in the frost. As if something had walked the perimeter over and over while they slept, or pretended to. The chickens disappeared first. Then the goats. Then the neighbor's dog, who used to bark at every stranger, stopped barking entirely and wandered off one night like it heard a better call. People in town started to change. Subtle at first. They forgot names, missed appointments, spoke in flat voices, like they were reading from inside their heads. Smiles stayed too long. Conversations ended too early. And no one mentioned the prince. Just stayed indoors more. Rifle always loaded. Coffee untouched. Eyes on the treeline, waiting for that shape to return. But it already had. It just wore new faces. She tells it quietly now. Not in town. Not over coffee. Not even to Frank, though he still sits by the window some nights, eyes too wide, waiting for something he never talks about. No. Just speaks into a tape recorder, hunched over a desk, her breath catching every so often when the wind hits the shutters just right. One candle, always one. She doesn't trust the lights anymore. They flicker too much when she speaks his name. She talks to the recorder like she's warning someone. Maybe herself. Maybe whoever finds the tape. The things she's seen, she says, they didn't end at the tree line. They didn't vanish with the snow or the silence. They learned. She stopped going into the woods. Yes, that was the first rule she made for herself. But the woods came to her, through cracks in the walls, through the eyes of neighbors who used to smile with teeth, through the gap in Frank's voice when he tries to say her name and comes up short. Some nights, she wakes and finds footprints in the hallway. Just one set, bare feet, wet, leading to her bedroom door, then stopping, as though it changed its mind. She's tried burning sage. She's tried prayer. She's tried silence. But silence is its favorite. It knows how to wait. It always has. So now, she tells a story. She tells it not to survive it. She knows better, but to make it real. To say out loud that it happened. That something stepped out from those woods and followed her back. Learn how to wear the world like clothing. Learn how to walk like a man but never blink. Learn how to knock. And it does. She hears it sometimes. Right after dusk. 3 knocks. Always 3. Never at the front door. She doesn't answer. She finishes the recording with a whisper. Her voice barely makes it to the tape. But it's clear enough. The words aren't rushed. They don't shake. They just tell the truth. It waits in the cold. It watches. And now it knocks. It didn't want to hurt me. It cried like it was scared of me too. I've never told anyone this. I've carried it around for years, buried so deep I convinced myself it couldn't have been real. But I remember every second. I remember the sound it made when it breathed, the way it hit its face, like it didn't want to look at it, the way it shook when I tried to speak. People always imagine monsters as loud and violent. Teeth, claws, snarls in the dark. This one, it was different. It wept. It shivered. And when it looked at me, I didn't see rage. I saw something that almost looked like shame. That's the part that keeps me up most nights. The crying. It wasn't angry. It was hurting. And maybe that's what makes it worse. Because even though it didn't scream or chase or try to tear me apart, I still feel like I barely got out alive. I was 11 when it happened. Just a kid. Skinny. Quiet. Always lost in my own head. I wasn't brave. I wasn't the type to go poking around in the dark or chasing ghost stories. I liked my routines. I liked knowing where things were. My family had just moved into a new place. Rented, nothing fancy. My dad had lost his job a few months earlier, and money was tight, I guess. Tighter than I understood back then. We were still smiling, still pretending everything was fine. But the house felt tired, like it had seen too many people come and go. The floors creaked even when no one was walking, and the pipes made this weird knocking sound at night that I learned to ignore. Most of our stuff was hand-me-downs. Friends, cousins, even neighbors chipped in. My room was patched together with whatever people didn't need anymore. The bed had this old, Saga mattress that smelled like someone else's attic. The bookshelf leaned a little to one side. And then there was a closet. My dad was proud of it. He said it was solid wood, real craftsmanship, better than anything we could buy brand new. He brought it home in the back of a borrowed truck and spent almost an hour cleaning it off in the driveway. It was tall, way taller than anything else in my room, and heavy-looking, with carved patterns along the top that reminded me of old church furniture. The first time I saw it, I didn't want it in the room. I remember saying that out loud. I didn't even mean to. It just came out. My mom told me to stop being ungrateful. My dad rolled his eyes and told me I was lucky to have it at all. So it stayed. Right there at the foot of my bed. Facing me. Every night. I couldn't explain it then, and I still can't now, but something about that thing made me feel watched. Like I had to keep my eyes on it, just in case. Like if I turned away too long, something would change. I never told anyone. What was I supposed to say? That I was scared of furniture? That a piece of old would make me sweat through my sheets? I was already the quiet kid. The weird one. I didn't want to make it worse. So I kept it to myself. I stayed quiet. I stayed in bed. And I watched it every night until the night it opened. My room was small, barely big enough for my bed and that closet. It sat at the end of a narrow hallway, away from the living room and the kitchen. The light was always dim, thanks to the tiny window that barely let in any sunlight. Most days, it felt like the shadows lived there before me. The closet stood out. It wasn't just old furniture. It looked like it belonged to a different time altogether. Dark wood, thick and heavy, with those carved patterns that made it look almost like a relic. When my dad brought it in, it smelled strange, like damp earth or something buried underground. But it looked dry, and no one seemed to notice or care. My parents called it nothing more than a piece of furniture. Just a closet, they said. You're imagining things. But I wasn't imagining anything. I started hearing things from around the neighborhood. There was this old man who lived down the street. Someone who seemed to know everything about the houses and people there. One afternoon when I was outside, I overheard him talking to my dad. He said the house used to belong to a retired mortician, a man who spent years working with the dead, who kept all sorts of things in the basement, things no one ever wanted to see. The closet, my dad said, probably came from that basement. Old furniture, maybe even some forgotten tools or equipment. It was the kind of story you don't hear and just forget. It lingers. I didn't know what to make of it, but I felt the weight of it every time I looked at that closet. Like it carried a history I wasn't supposed to know. Like it held secrets waiting to be uncovered. And maybe that was exactly what it did. At first, It was small things. My toys started disappearing. One day, I'd leave a toy car on my desk, and the next morning it would be inside that closet. I never remembered putting them there. Sometimes it was my favorite action figure. Sometimes a book. Always inside the closet, sitting where I could find them but couldn't explain how they got there. I told myself I was just forgetting, that maybe I put them there and didn't remember, but it happened too often. The feeling started to creep in, that the closet wasn't just a piece of furniture anymore. It was something else. Something alive. At night, I began pulling my blanket over my face. Not because I was afraid of monsters hiding under bed or in the shadows. No, it was different. It felt like something was watching me. Not just waiting for me to fall asleep, but waiting for me to open my eyes. Like it knew when I was awake and when I wasn't. One night, I woke up because I heard something. Soft, almost like breathing. Slow, quiet breaths coming from the closet. I froze, trying to tell myself it was just the house settling or the wind outside. But the sound didn't stop. I reached out, my hand shaking as I grabbed the door handle. The closet door creaked open and I looked inside. Nothing. Empty space. Just a faint smell of that damp earth smell I couldn't shake. No toys. No shadows. No breathing. I closed the door and pulled the blanket tighter over my head, but the feeling didn't leave. It stayed with me, waiting, watching. The strange noises didn't stop. They only got louder. Every night at the same time, I would hear soft crying coming from inside the closet. It was quiet at first, almost like someone holding back tears, but it was always there. I started dreading that moment, because it felt like the sound was meant for me, like it was begging for something, though I wasn't sure what. One night, I thought I saw a shadow moving behind a closed door. It wasn't a trick of the light. It shifted and twisted in a way that no normal shadow should. I froze, staring at it, but when I blinked, it was gone. I tried to tell my parents, hoping they would believe me, but they just laughed it off. My mom even opened the closet, looked inside, and said there was nothing there. Of course there wasn't. How could there be? But I wasn't convinced. The crying, the shadow, the feeling of being watched, it was all real to me. I started sleeping with the closet door wide open, keeping my eyes fixed on it all night, waiting for something to happen. I didn't want to feel helpless anymore. Then, one night, I couldn't take it any longer. I needed to know if I was losing my mind, or if something was really there. So, I slowly opened the closet door, careful not to make a sound. And I saw it. It was a creature, thin and bent, with skin so pale it almost looked translucent. Its eyes were sunken deep into its face, dark and empty. Its limbs were long and fragile, like twigs about to snap. It wasn't moving aggressively. It wasn't angry or trying to hurt me. It was just there, and it was crying. Real, broken sobs that shook its whole body. I wanted to run, to scream, but I couldn't. I was frozen, staring at this thing that didn't belong anywhere, but was somehow trapped in my closet. Then, without warning, it screamed. A high, terrible sound that tore through the quiet of the night. It was desperate and filled with pain. I slammed the door shut and backed away, heart pounding like I'd never felt before. That night, everything changed. I knew the closet wasn't just furniture anymore. Something was inside, and it was crying out for help, or maybe warning me. Either way, I couldn't ignore it any longer. I didn't know what to do. The scream had drained all the courage I thought I had, so I did the only thing that felt right. I hid inside the closet. The space was cramped, dark, and cold, but it was the only place where I could catch my breath without being seen. I pressed myself against the back wall, trying to make myself as small as possible. I thought the creature might come after me, but it didn't. Instead, something else came in. A second figure slipped through the doorway, a taller one, heavier, twisted in a way that made it look almost like a grotesque shadow of the first. It moved slowly, dragging itself like it was weighed down by something invisible. Neither of them made a move to hurt me. Instead, They murmured to each other in soft, broken sounds. Words I couldn't understand, but they felt almost gentle. It was strange. Here were these creatures. Clearly unnatural, but the way they interacted wasn't violent. It was almost like they were afraid. Too. As I watched from my hiding place, I realized the first one wasn't a monster at all. It was something childlike, small, trembling, scared. The way it cried before wasn't anger or menace. It was fear. It needed something. Maybe comfort, maybe release, or maybe just someone to listen. That's when the story of the mortician down the street came rushing back to me. The old man said this house had belonged to a man who dealt with death in a way nobody really understood. He kept things in his basement. Things that weren't supposed to be seen. Things better left alone. Were these creatures trapped there long ago? Were they hidden away, forgotten like broken toys? Abandoned by someone who thought locking them up would make everything okay? I didn't have the answers. All I were pieces of a puzzle scattered in my mind. The crying, the murmurs, the heavy silence that followed. I could feel the weight of something old and sad hanging in the air, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't put it all together. What I did know was this. The closet was a doorway to something beyond what I understood, and those things inside it, whatever they were, weren't just here by accident. They belonged to a story I had only just begun to uncover. The small creature's eyes locked onto me, and with a trembling finger, it pointed right at where I was hiding. In that instant, I felt like the world slowed down, every heartbeat echoing in my ears. The taller one began to move toward me. Its slow, deliberate steps sounding louder than they should have in the tight space of the closet. I was frozen, couldn't move, couldn't even breathe properly. My mind screamed to run, to get out, but my body refused. Then, just like that, everything stopped. The air disappeared, and I was swallowed by complete darkness. Nothing. No sound. No weight. Just an empty blackness that filled every part of me. When I came to, I was back in my bed. The morning sun spilled to the window, bright and warm, painting everything gold. The closet door stood wide open, just like I'd left it, or maybe just like it was when the night ended. I blinked a few times, trying to steady myself, to believe that maybe it had all been a bad dream. But deep down, I knew better. It wasn't a dream. Not really. Something had happened in that dark place. Something I couldn't explain. The feeling lingered, heavy and real, like a secret press against my skin. And even though the sunlight filled the room, I knew that what I had seen, what I had felt, wasn't done with me. It was waiting, still there, in the shadows just beyond the open closet door. After that night, I never spoke about what happened. Not to my parents, not to anyone. The closet was gone the following week. They said it was just old furniture, nothing more. But they never explained why they were so eager to get rid of it. I didn't press. I was too afraid, too unsure what I'd say, or if anyone would believe me. Years have passed. I'm grown now, with a life that looks normal from the outside. But sometimes when I'm alone, I still hear the crying. It's faint, like a whisper carried on the wind, and sometimes it comes in my dreams, soft sobs that feel far away and yet impossibly close. It's a sound I can't shake, no matter how much I try. My own son's toys disappear now and then. They turn up in places that don't make sense. Under the couch, behind the door, tucked in the corners of rooms where no one would think to look. It's a small thing, but it sends a chill through me every time it happens. Like a reminder, like something is still watching. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I see them, tiny streaks like tear stains near the closet in our house. They're faint, almost invisible, but I know they're there, like a mark left behind, a memory that refuses to fade. I don't think whatever was in that closet ever really left. I believe it learned how to hide somewhere else, to stay just out of sight, waiting, watching, always close enough to be felt, but never fully seen.